Welcome to the Lady Landlords podcast, where we empower women to gain financial independence through real estate investing. I'm your host, Becky Nova, founder of Lady Landlords. If you're ready to buy, manage, and grow your real estate portfolio, then let's get started.
Do you already own a few rental properties and you really want to be able to buy more, and you see other investors scaling and growing and closing on property after property after property, and you're sitting there saying, how are they able to afford this? If so, today's episode of the Lady Landlords podcast is just for you, because what we're going to talk about is just 3 simple ways that you can scale your rental portfolio and close ASAP on another rental property. Thank you for joining me for today's episode on the Lady Landlords podcast. This is such a popular topic because I see so many lady landlords in our Facebook community get stuck in this save, buy cycle. Now, if you're a person like me that invests in high cost of living areas, or if you are looking to invest in also a high cost of living area, sometimes that can just get very difficult and take a really long time to be able to grow, okay? And I hear people saying, I want to scale faster. I want to be able to create more cash flow. I want to be able to do those things. And sometimes it could just be very difficult. So I'm going to give you very simple ways to be able to do that. And we're going to get a little more complicated, and we're going to talk about things that are a little bit more creative as we just break down just 3 simple options, okay, of how you can be able to scale your portfolio where you don't have to have a trust fund, you don't have to go win the lottery, any of those types of things, okay? So let's dive in here, because this was something that made a huge difference in my ability to scale. My husband, Emilio, and I, we bought our first rental property back in 2018 in New York. That was a duplex. And after I ended up moving into that property, realizing that the tenants were covering the entire mortgage plus some, I was like, we have to do this again. And that is what helped us get to 10 doors in under 3 years, bringing in 10K months in profit, and allowed us to be able to retire before 40 and become full-time real estate investors. So because of that, this is a topic that I'm very passionate about, and I want to see other women be able to do that, okay? So let's dive in here. Strategy number 1, I already mentioned. It is the most straightforward, simple path, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with going with this strategy to be able to scale. And that is simply saving, using the money that you have on hand, okay? Now, why or am I going to even still start with this when entertaining the idea of being able to scale? Well, unfortunately, a lot of people do not save in a way that will start to accumulate enough to really think about buying those rental properties moving forward, okay? It becomes very intentional to start to budget to save towards that down payment, okay? This is something, one of the first things that I did was actually set up an entire separate account that was specifically a down payment savings bucket, okay? That was actually an account I didn't want to look at. I made sure that money went direct deposit to that. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. It was not something I was looking at on a regular basis, because I knew that that had an automatic transfer and what was automatically going into that account. What that helped with was it made sure that before I started thinking about what's my fun money, what's my travel money, what are all of those extra things that maybe I want to do, that money came off the top. And that made a huge difference. If I went and I looked and I said, okay, great, cool, I paid my bills, that stuff's out. Now, hey, look, I have this whole amount of money left after my paycheck at the end of the month. Great, what do I want to do with that money? How do I want to spend it? Where am I putting that money? That was going to make it much more difficult. Instead of me seeing that, I wanted to make sure that that was actually coming off the top. I did that. I made sure that my husband was doing that, and we had money that was funneling into that. One of the tricks that we actually did is when we were living in a rental, when we were still living in the Bronx in New York, we paid a certain amount of money for that apartment. When we then bought our duplex and moved into our own house, we actually cut our living expenses because we owned the property and we were house hacking, and we had tenants that were able to contribute towards that mortgage and those taxes and that insurance and everything like that. But my husband and I actually increased the amount of money that we put into an account for household bills. right? So we didn't say, oh, well, great. Well, now that our living expenses are cheaper, okay, great. Well, now we will just have more fun money and have more money to be able to spend. No, we actually doubled down on what we were paying and put that all into an account that just sat there and was able to accumulate. We use a high yield savings account. I don't know why they call it a high yield savings account, because if you've had one, there is no high yield, right? And this was back in 2018, 2019. So rates, I mean, you weren't making anything on that. But what was important was we didn't see it. We didn't touch it. It was something that was just a no-brainer when it came to savings. But what was good for us, especially living in New York, that was a few $1,000s every single month, right? So by putting that $3,000 into that account, I mean, in a year, that gave us a down payment savings bucket of $36,000, right? We also were able to put some of the profits from the property, and then that actually just kind of boosted that and helped a little bit more too. But it was that intention of really savings that goes into that. There are other accounts that you can use. I've seen other women that have been able to do this with retirement accounts, 401ks. They're able to still be putting money into those accounts where they could borrow from and take that money out. So being intentional with your savings is going to be incredibly important, okay? This, once again, it's going to take you a little bit more time to do this, okay? Patience, consistency, understanding what number you're really going to need in that account is going to make a difference. But depending on what your risk tolerance is, that's okay. You don't have to be buying a property every single day. You don't have to buy a property every single year to still be able to replace your income. I say this all the time on our podcast and in our Facebook group, but you don't need 100 properties usually to be able to retire from your job. My whole goal was to own the least amount of properties and to make the most amount of money with it. That was my goal. It took less than 10 units to replace my 6-figure salary in cancer research. That was it. I wasn't looking for all of that money. I wasn't looking for all the headaches that come with just dozens and dozens of rental properties. I wanted to be intentional, to find just a few rental properties that were going to give me the biggest returns. But a part of running any business, whether it's real estate or anything else that you decide to do, always comes down to budgeting and knowing your numbers. So you should be running your household in the same way. For years, and still to date now in 2025, I still track every single penny that comes in and goes out of my household, not just for me, but also my husband, not just our businesses, but also our personal expenses. I want to make sure I understand where my money is going. Then that way, that is knowledge for me to be able to make decisions. Where all of a sudden am I spending more money? Why am I doing that? Where are those funds going to? Those are things that we want to make sure that we are watching, because if we're sitting there saying, well, it's taking me too long to save, I'm never getting there, that becomes the time to say, well, maybe what am I going to be able to sacrifice? What am I willing to sacrifice? If you've been listening to our podcast, one thing I do not sacrifice on is my travel. I love it. If you ask me to go to another country, I'm going to go. I'm going to book a flight that day. So that I'm not willing to skimp on. But you know what? My husband and I have been driving cars that are both about 10 years old. We've had them for years. They are paid off. That makes a huge difference for us to not have that payment. That's personally something that's a little bit less on my value scale than my travel is. So I can make those changes. My husband and I can also be very frugal when we go out, when we make decisions about how we're spending our money. And we had to think about that from a very intentional perspective. We didn't have to do that forever. And I'm definitely not advocating for saying, go eat ramen for the rest of your life just so you could save to buy real estate. But are there things that I looked at saying, hey, I can put this a little bit extra money into my down payment savings bucket? Or, you know what, I can go and I can spend a night out with some friends and I can go a little bit extra. Well, sometimes maybe I didn't want to be extra. Sometimes I did, and that was okay. But I made sure to make that decision of what I was comfortable with. So one simple way, just start with savings. And like I said, it doesn't have to be a high yield savings account. There are so many different types of accounts that you can use that can build up that cash that then can be used for real estate. Now, strategy number 2 that I want you to think about is the idea of actually using the equity you already have in a property. It does not even have to be a rental property. It can be your own personal home What's really great is any type of property that you're buying, as you are consistently making payments, well, that's also money and equity that you can use. And it's not just what you paid into it that you can actually take out and borrow, but if you've owned that property over time, any appreciation, any equity that has just come into that property is actually money that you have access to. So that's where home equity loans, HELOCs, cash out refinances all really come into play. We actually have an episode on the Lady Landlords podcast all about one of our inner circle members named Stephanie. Stephanie was able to grow her portfolio without money from her own pocket after that very first property that she bought. The reason for that is because she was able to take equity out of previous properties and pay it forward for really the next down payment. It was something that when you're watching what interest rates are, even if a cash out refinance, let's say, I get it, you bought back in 2021, 2022, well, and you probably have these ridiculously low interest rates that everybody else is jealous of, and you don't want to get rid of it. Cool. I understand not wanting to get rid of it. But there are other ways using lines of credit to still be able to access what that money looks like. So you can do that. You also might be in a situation where you say, you know what? Yes, I'm going to have to give up that interest rate. But by giving up that interest rate, it'll allow me to free up hundreds of thousands of dollars possibly to go and buy other real estate. You can not only increase your cash flow, but then just go pay off that original property anyways, which one will make sure that you're not paying any interest extra on that specific property. And also when you pay off a property, that almost always is going to increase your cash flow on that actual property as well. So that's where deal analysis and really understanding your numbers is going to come into play. If you need to learn a little bit more about HELOCs and cash out refinances and even how to get a line of credit from an investment property, which is a different process, we have an episode all about that here on the Lady Landlords podcast, where we have a whole debate and battle over when to use that HELOC versus that cash out refinance. So I'll make sure to go link that down in the show notes so you can go back and take a listen to that episode as well. Why this works is because you're really just recycling money from properties you already own to be able to grow faster. If you've ever heard of people doing flips, there's something called the BRRRR strategy, where you buy a property, you're able to renovate it, rent it out. The idea is that when you refinance it, you're pulling out the money that you put in, you're pulling out your down payment again, and then you're using it for the next property. You don't have to worry about saving money every single time to be able to do that. You're using the money that you already have in the equity of properties you already own. Things just to watch out with that is you need to make sure that you know what your new payment's going to be. What is the interest rate on the money that you're borrowing? One of the biggest mistakes that I see is women, when they're doing their deal analysis, they don't factor in the cost of borrowing their money. What I mean is, let's say you have a property that you own, you are going to go and you're going to take a line of credit on it, and it's going to cost you 7.5% to borrow the $60,000 that you're going to take out. Well, when you're doing a deal analysis on a new property and you say, okay, great, well, I have $60,000 I can use as a down payment, you also have to factor in that interest rate that it costs you to borrow that money. You need to make sure, because that's going to impact what your cash flow is. So with the right numbers, this is a tool that is fantastic, especially if you've owned property for a few years. You probably have a ton of money just sitting there. So if you're sitting there in your house, scratching your head on where am I going to get money for another property, honestly, look around you, because it's probably right where you are sitting. Then option 3, let's get a little more creative here. What I think is really fantastic about real estate is there are so many different cool ways to be able to find capital to invest in real estate. But you have to be willing to do those things. These options are not going to be as simple. They're not things that you could just kind of do on your own. They are things that are going to be a little bit more involved and might have to stretch you and have you grow. But if this is something that you're saying, I just want my time freedom, I just want to be able to stay home with my kids, I just want to be able to leave this job I hate, whatever it is that you're looking to accomplish in your life, if you are at that breaking point, some of these options might be around for you. First one I was going to mention is seller financing. In seller financing, this is where you can make an agreement with the seller to really be the bank. So what that means is, since the seller is the bank, you can determine what your own down payment's going to be. You can determine and negotiate what interest rates are going to look like, how many years, what the term of the loan is going to be. All of those different factors are now within your control. You just have to have and negotiate with that seller, okay? I'm not saying that there are just opportunities for seller financing just sitting there for you to go pick up. We have to make a lot of these deals happen, okay? It's really that idea that not everything is just sitting there waiting for us, but if we want to be able to do something and you have the willpower to do it and follow through on it, these are all options for you. Can you imagine going to a seller and not having to put down any money to get a property? I'm going to also kind of couple this up with finding off-market properties. Not everything you need to buy needs to be sitting there on the MLS. You absolutely can. I've bought almost all my properties off the MLS because I've been able to find good deals. I don't need to get creative if things were actually just working, right? But I have bought off market, and honestly, sometimes there's some great ways to be able to do that. But like I said, they take a little bit more work to do. The more work you put in, honestly, there's usually a bit more reward in it. So if you need help finding off-market properties, I'm also going to link an episode down. I did a very special webinar all about how I find off-market properties. Huge game changer in being able to do that. Huge game changer. So I'll link that down in the episode as well to get some more information there. Next up, within getting creative here, is really partnering with somebody. There are some ways that you can find a partner to be able to say, hey, I'm bringing the expertise, I'm bringing the property management, I'm going to bring the boots on the ground. You are the person with the cash, and you can really create what's going to be a beneficial situation to both of you in that way, okay? My one caveat here, always make sure to use an attorney, get things in writing, especially if you're going to partner with a family member. But you absolutely have the option to find somebody else around you to be able to partner with. Maybe that partner's also in Lady Landlords. Another option that's fantastic, you might have heard the term OPM, other people's money. Using private money lenders is a fantastic way to raise that capital. You don't have to deal with a partnership. You don't have to deal with making decisions with somebody because they don't actually have any decision-making abilities. They lend you money for an agreed upon amount. You also agree to terms, highly recommend attorney here as well, to be able to say, great, this is an interest rate. Here's the terms of how long it's going to take me to pay you back. It's a great option to be able to raise the capital, not have to deal with the partnership or having to negotiate what color you're painting walls, whatever it may be with somebody, but to really be able to say, let's get the funds and let me go be able to scale. I love private money lending. I actually do private money lending myself. That tends to fill the gaps. Once again, I find very easy to be able to save. I increased my savings rate dramatically to where my husband and I have been saving about 80% of our income over the past few years. And that helps us be able to fund our deals. But within that, between properties, I want to find a way that I can make my money work for me. And once again, I already told you my opinion about those high yield savings accounts and about how it doesn't exactly make me very happy with what those rates are. So what I'm able to actually do is invest in other people's projects, and I can still make money on my money through that interest, and they're able to scale their property. It works for both parties when set up properly. What's great is that you don't need to be wealthy to invest, but you do need to be willing to explore these different options. So let me know down in the comments, which option sounds best for you? Put a 1 down in the chat and let me know if you're saying, you know what, I want to go a slow and steady route and I simply am going to save. 2, put down in the show notes, let me know if tapping into equity, property you already own, is the direction that you want to go. Or 3, if you're ready to get creative and say, that's it, this year I am scaling, I am growing, I am making changes, put a 3 down for me. Let me know that you are really in that spot where you want to get creative and try some things that are out of the box. Because when you do things differently, you will get rewarded in a different way too. What's amazing was when you scale your portfolio, it's really not about needing and having this endless money. It's really about learning strategies, about how to leverage, how to scale, how to connect, how to network. And that's what turns one door into the next door, into the next door. If you need help on really figuring out which one of these strategies or any of those creative financing options is really the right one for you, feel free to reach out to me. You can always email me at becky@lady-landlords.com. What that does is that'll put us in touch. Ask me some questions. Let me know what's going on with you, and I'm happy to help support you in which direction might be best. So if I can help in any way, I'm always here to be able to do so. But thank you very much for joining me in today's episode. If you found today's episode helpful, please do make sure to subscribe to the Lady Landlords podcast. We release new episodes every single Tuesday, all on topics about how to acquire property, how to manage property, and how to scale for financial freedom. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week for the Lady Landlords podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Lady Landlords podcast. If you're feeling stuck in your real estate investing journey, visit lady-landlord.com to book a 15-minute orientation call with me and see if you're ready to join our mentorship program. Or you can subscribe to our newsletter and join our Facebook group for exclusive real estate investing tips and offers. Invest with confidence. Become a Lady Landlord today.